So hi everyone, and hi Lorena. Today my guest is Lorena Muñoz del Campo, and we are talking about sustainable finance. Having some experience in the banking sector myself, I have accumulated a lot of questions, and I luckily found Lorena, who is happy to answer them today for me. So the topic is sustainable finance, and in particular, we will touch a lot of financial institutions questions, issues, behavior in regards with sustainability. So Lorena, the stage goes to you. Please introduce yourself for the listeners a bit more, and tell us what we're busy with today.
I hope I can answer your question, or at least a little chat about it and share our frustrations about it. Okay, I started in environmental engineering. I'm biochemist in 1992, and it was very frustrating. So I realized after a couple of years that I won't be able to do much if I couldn't speak the language of the decision makers. And that language was finance. So I moved from science, straight science, to administration to management. At first, I did a management diploma, and I realized I was good on that. And in between all the topics, I like finance more. So I did my master's degree in finance. I started working in what was in those times environmental liabilities evaluation. There was no topic, no jobs on sustainable finance. Sustainable finance didn't exist back then. Mm-hmm. So I started working in environmental liability evaluation in due diligence, normally due diligence for fusion and acquisitions at first, like introducing the value of the environment in the asset that was trade, and then also evaluating assets and correcting through the environmental, like environmental liabilities, how they affect the value of the asset of the company when you do the transaction. And then for loans, I start with medium-sized loan and then big loans. Mm-hmm. The point is that environment itself is back then, 20-something years ago, was not really important for nobody. Birds and, trees couldn't pay the supermarket. That was the sentence of my father when I told him I would go through environmental. And he told me that, he felt like he wasted all that money educating me. It was kind of frustrating. When I went through finance, it was okay because he's a finance guy too. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I moved from this environmental liability evaluation for due diligence to the carbon markets at the beginning of the 2000s, mm-hmm. mainly in energy and waste management. And then I realized I could structure funding for those projects, not just selling the carbon credits, but using those assets as collaterals and so on. So I was able to reduce finance risk through that area. And I started moving from this just technical and finance evaluation to really structuring finance interesting stuff. And I've been doing that for the last 12, 15 years maybe. So I moved from small, medium-sized project to big loans. I structured like that the electricity grid for Ecuador. Ecuador is a Latin American country. It was a $4.3 billion project, and the collateral I used was the 2.5 million tons of CO2 they will be reducing through changing the electricity grid from fossil to renewable. They were 85% fossil and they were moving to 80% renewable. Mm-hmm. And I could reduce the rate for the loan. It was a $4.5 billion loan to 50 years from 9.8% to 5.25%, restructuring all the debt and including this collateral.
That was a governmental agency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The project was funded by the AIDB Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the consultancy, and the client was the Ecuadorian government, specifically the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance. So at the end, it was all the money enters for infrastructure. They did anyway. When this loan finally went through, it was a huge impact on the country. And this was between this job I did 10 years ago. So I realized you could do things and demonstrate really that evaluating the socio-environmental risk is good for the business finally. You can create economical value doing that. And finally, is that argument that goes okay. So I translate normally all my evaluations in money. I monetize that.
How exactly did you do that? I will give you I know in our pre-conversation we discussed a little bit. How do you exactly translate the environmental and social issues, the findings that you came up with during your due diligence, into the financial risk? How do you exactly put a price on that, or
it's part of my PhD thesis.
I know, and I asked you to do it in 5 minutes.
It's not obvious. But anyway, normally, since I come from science, for me it's easier to understand all those variables. I understand that people that comes straight from business, management, finance, or that area, is more difficult because normally scientists don't like to talk about money.
Yeah.
They just talk about scientific findings that you cannot really translate into something real in the real world. So what I do is to take those findings and I try to translate environment in hectares of natural resources used, the ecological footprint. That could be something like if you have a finance statement, would be part of the running cost, because it's running the facility will need some environment issues to run it, like, I don't know, water, air, soil, natural resources in general terms. So all of that can be translated in ecological footprint. Ecological footprint can be translated in tons of CO2. And then if you have the tons of CO2, you don't use the spot price. You can go through Nordhaus, Richard Nordhaus, the Nobel Prize. He calculated the social cost of the carbon. So each country normally has more or less a social cost for it. So you can see the impact of this project in terms of tons of CO2 and hectares of natural resources, because every impact of that facility will be translated in positive and negative, in assets and liabilities in terms of environment. And then it's not anymore trees or birds or whatever, it's money right now. And it's either a debt or an asset. And then you go through, if it's a running facility, it's one that is in operation, you can go and see the normal evaluation of environmental liabilities, and that is easy. You can easily translate it in money in the long-term liabilities.
Yeah.
Then you have the structure. Then you can restructure that environmental debt. You can do whatever you want with it. Since that's in the monetization. In the risk part, since 1991, there is the World Bank Association has the Ecuadorian principles that can be translated in like 8 points, and each point is, I think you may be going through those evaluations. You have projects A, B, C, and then B that's spread in two, and then you can translate everything in projects A, B, C.
Yeah, the value of risk, highest.
The value of risk, and then you have the risk beta for environment, and you can include it in the loan, in the rate of the loan.
Yeah. How about the social risk? Do you have any examples of that? Yeah.
Normally, when a project is, well, in my country, we have a lot of mining. We are a copper exporter, the bigger copper exporter of the world. So we have a lot of social issues relating to mining exploitation. I don't know if you're aware, but among the 22 transnational mining companies in Latin America, 20 of them has actually processed lawsuits against them because due to human rights violation. We have the higher rate of murders of activists, environmental activists, normally indigenous people. So we have a lot of issues, social issues in Latin America, and a lot of inequality. My country is one of the most, the one that has the highest inequality rate in the OECD. We are OECD actually. Well, what I do if you have, normally there is information available. So before going through a country, I review the Human Development Index of the country, corrected by inequality. And I can go through the population that is in the, depending on which kind of evaluation I'm doing, that's in the influential area of the project where the product will be installed. And then one can calculate how this Human Development Index will be impacted in positive or negative again with this project. Then you can calculate at the end if this population will receive an improvement on their Human Development Index, then their quality of life, or if that quality of life will be reduced, and if it will be reduced, how much it will be. And all of that is GDP invest in population. So again, you arrive to money. Then again, you will have social asset and social liabilities that can be restructured, and liabilities always can be restructured. And if you can restructure it, in the best case scenario, one can, at the end, has an output of maybe create environmental assets and or social assets at the end. So for instance, in Mexico, they had like the extend responsibility of the importer and producer. That law is called the waste law. So I helped the country in developing a norm for plastic recycling. And that norm, if it was implemented, government was aware of the fact that a lot of people that is producing plastic and using plastic, and all of that will be against this norm. It's a federative country, so it was a norm for the country, each state. So what I calculate was that if we start to recycle those plastics, you will have an industry that will decrease, which is the plastic producers that won't like that norm. And then you will have another industry that will rise, which is the recyclers. Recycling it's positive in terms of producing reductions on CO2. If you analyze the whole life cycles. So that's what I did, analyzing the whole life cycles. And also, since Mexico is in the the northern border is United States, even Mr. Trump says that Mexicans are being exported to United States. Normally, United States export to Mexico waste. Through the line, it says raw material for recycling. For a country that cannot recycle, they don't have recycling capabilities. Back then, when I started the project, recycling capabilities of Mexico were 5%. So it was kind of a huge impact on border population. So when I translate everything, at the end, the impact, the global impact of introducing the norm for recycling the plastic was like almost $2 billion of GDP plus, increasing of the GDP of the country, 1.5 million of direct employment. Also plastic in the border of with the United States agricultural areas. The plastic was given to poor families and they use it to warm themselves, so they burn it inside the households. Wow. So there was a huge social impact of that activity.
Yeah, that's
totally and awesome. By transforming those families from just pure agricultural activity to agriculture plus recycling, because they could receive that plastic and then pack it, after that take the plastic to the recycling facility or to a point where the truck could take this plastic. So you will increase the income from that family because they were paid for doing this task, taking the plastic and letting the plastic to be recycled instead of burning it. So at the end, there was a increasing of the Human Development Index of those population by increasing the income per family, but also reducing the health hazard that implicate to have those plastic burned inside the household. So, and that is another GDP that is reduced. They don't need to go and put money on that. They could take that money and put it in another way. Also, the project will reduce about 2 million tons of CO2 a year, which is 3% of the Paris Agreement cap of the country. If you consider that in Latin America, reducing 1 ton of CO2 is about $180 per ton, and the social carbon cost is about $40, and that country has $5 of tax for the CO2, you have the reduction on the GDP invest in terms of just pure social issues will be $35 per ton. And in terms of GDP invest in technology will be $175 per ton in reduction of the GDP that need to be invested. So finally, you can calculate, which I did, the economical incentives to allow this new industry to grow and to be to start. So right now, what they have is in the first 3 years, they increased the recycling capabilities from 20,000 tons a year to 45,000 tons a year, because we calculate, I design with the people, with the Association of Recyclers, that we're a small industry right now, we're a big industry, the best technologies available, which facility was the most in terms of technical and finance, that was the most feasible facility in terms of the technical issue, the process lines, but also the environmental issues, the social issues, because it's an industry that needs a lot of human resources. In our countries, maybe we cannot pay for a process line that has robots and everything, super automatic. What we have is that you have more labor. So instead of having maybe a facility with 10 persons, you have a facility with 50 people. And in the border area, where there is a lot of issues with cartels and all of that, and you have mostly even towns of just women that were left behind by or their men that went to United States to find, the American dream. They are normally left behind. The guy goes to US and after 3 months he has another girl back over there. So they stop sending money and they are left behind with children and normally alone. So those facilities has lots of women, and we put inside facilities like daycares where the children can stay there and are not taken by the cartels for their purpose. So you have all the environmental and social stuff happening like in a beautiful way, but all of that finally is translated in GDP, that is increased jobs that are made, reduction of CO2, and all of that, it's money. It's $1 billion in this case.
Yeah.
I present that in a conference last year. I wrote a paper about that in the track of innovative economical models. I think what we need to change is the economical model. It's because right now in the account, when one goes and calculates stuff, productivity, for instance, is work, like labor plus machinery, and then they say ceteris paribus. The environment is not ceteris paribus, it's not anymore like infinite natural resources. Natural resources has an end. We are at the top of it. We don't have more like 2 or 3 Earths available on natural resources. So since right now natural resources are not fully available for any of the initiative human can have, I think what we need to start to do is to calculate those issues properly. And then start the priority on projects that can have those natural resources and use those natural resources, and that will help to transit to a circular economy and finally to a green economy, because we need to move from what we have right now, where I remember my first years were really frustrated when those managers and even my father told me that, with this, you won't pay, with birds, you don't pay the supermarket. And I used to say to him, well, dollars are green too. So I think that by translating adequately this language, this like scientific language, to the language that decision makers know, understand, and sometimes take into the account, we will be okay. But also, I start with this social stuff. Even at first, for me, was really difficult in terms of, I'm scientist, I'm biochemist. My concentration was in molecular biology. So I used to deal with bacteria and virus, not birds, no, nothing, none of that, okay? So my stuff was like energy, water treatment, water recycling, all of that, because it was related with my biochemist. So to go and deal with people, for someone that used to work alone all day long, for me, it's not really quite a change. In the lab, it's really a lonely life in many ways. Like, well, so it was different. And for me, translating it into something that politicians can use and manager can use and put in their, in their books and their sustainability reports and so on. It's good for them, and it goes good for the business at the end.
I have a question though. Now the situation with coronavirus specifically shows us that short-term thinking is no way to win. I've heard a lot in my time in my time during the corporate career time whatsoever. The management would say, we're only here for 4 years. In Ukraine, for example, it's 4 years term for the local and even country powers. They would say, we're only here for 4 years. What do you want? Let us take whatever we have to take, money, and we're gone. The next, next portion will start their next cycle. How would you explain, and what would you suggest in terms of the environmental and social and financial incentives if you are in the situation like this?
Well, I think in that situation.
Yes, if they only care for short-term wins.
Yeah, well, I've been in that situation a lot. But what I do is I'm good on that. I'm the scientist girl. So I can put all what I do in point number 1, number 2, number 3, and then see how much time it will take. And for instance, in 2018, I did that for a politician. I never deal with I always deal with the Ministry of Finance. Mm-hmm. So finance guys talking about money. Not really with the politician guy. I normally give my report and they say blah, 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 blah. So that in that meeting, I was with the president, and he was not interested in what we were doing, really. So I told him, this project will include, at the end of the project, in 4 years, which is his period, this amount of money, which was like $1.3 billion GDP, which is an increase of this amount. It was like 2.5 percentage point of the GDP for your period. After that, if they continue to do well, it will be in 7 years, which I calculate the project in 7 years. In 1 year, I can give you this, which is like you can go and cut a ribbon, press, and it will have a huge impact because it's a lot of people that is impact in the positive way. Mm-hmm. And then in the second year, I can give you this part of the project. And this is not ribbons, but it will improve the quality of life. So you will be able to give a speech about this issue. Mm-hmm. And then at the 4th year, before the election, we will have this part of the project delivered. So by doing that, like spreading the project in, like small,
manageable pieces.
Mm-hmm. And for them, it's easier to manage. They can see other benefit that one cannot see. Maybe that person will be able to introduce someone for the next period. I don't know, but I delivered the project like that. And the other thing I use really is that normally when you include in the first benefits in terms of social issue, women and children, it's better. Normally men don't care much about social issues. Women, yes. So if you do good to children, you will have 50% of the people that is voting actually voting for you. And women always remember what you do when you do good to a child or when you do wrong to a child. And that's a long-term memory. And that's what I use that in that moment. And also, I didn't use that in Mexico too. But I didn't use that in Ecuador. In Ecuador was the poor sector of the economy. I used part of the income that would be arriving to the country in order to reduce the electricity bill for poor families. And it was a long-term low tariff for them. It lasts until nowadays. It's been like 8 years already since this new grid was in place, and it just this year they increased that tariff, so it lasts really long period of time, and they didn't need that. It's because they want to take the money. So, and in Peru I did the same with the transport project. I used part of it to reduce the tariff for poor families.
Mm-hmm.
And in structuring, well, in my country, we had a really a social blast last year. But before that, I designed a green bond fund by Global Carbon Fund, the Green Climate Fund.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you. Can you give me more, details about this green bond? Whose idea was it, and what exactly is inside of that package?
Well, in real, it was like the real life was, I was here at home. It was March 24, like last year. My birthday is March 29. Okay. My mother passes, and my father always takes celebrating the birthdays. So I took that week to be available for my father, because my sister-in-law birthday is March 25, my brother March 30, and myself March 29. So it's one big celebration. And I received a call saying that if I was available to, because they needed a senior finance for stuff like they were designing. And it was the Latin American Reconstruction Bank and the AIDB that give money to my country in order to develop something in like I don't know if you're aware that COP25 were supposed to happen in my country. So the country needed to show something, and in order to be able to show something, those banks give some money in order to have a consultancy and do something, let's do a green bond. But nobody knew how to do it. So they decided to do something in renewable. Politicians always, when they think in sustainability, they think in a solar panel and on powers, because you cannot cut ribbons. You can't cut ribbons. You cannot cut ribbons on windows, for instance.
Yeah.
Don't show. Well, the point is they called me because nobody knew how to do it. And what I did is to take, to see the market in terms of energy. They needed, they wanted in renewables. And 60% of the market is medium classes and lower income families that are out of the social security policies. They don't receive anything, no money for them, just they need to fight for themselves. And then 60% of that market is also 60% of the households of the country. And I designed some finance instrument that will go from that money that will arrive to the country to the banks as warranties, collateral for credit. So if you receive one, you can have like 10 in terms of loans given. But also, it was really interesting. I had fun doing that. I did revolving credits. So in real terms, I multiply the money like by 50, what we receive. Yeah, by doing like a really interesting model, a finance model. Well, one of the issues was that our institutional framework is not prepared for such stuff. So I needed to go through some institutions that already exist in the country that were not really the government. So the government the Ministry of Finance will not be receiving that money. That was one issue. They didn't want that. But finally they accepted, because it was a huge stuff to promote, like the political way, So, and right now the former Ministry of Finance has a huge sign saying, I did the green bond, but it was me really. for real in my house, waiting for my birthday cake. And it was in 1 week. I did it in 1 week. I needed to present it to the banks it was March 24. I presented it just before my birthday, like 5 days after that. I did the 5 finance instruments, like collateral for housing, changing, including solar panels, improving the walls and windows in order to reduce the thermal energy use in winters, and also for small and medium-sized companies, cooperatives, schools, and I designed also this one is really interesting because I did part of the money, I use it in collateral for startups. So you could develop brokers that will analyze projects and make like portfolios of projects. So they would apply to this money to banks as collateral. So other investors will be interested in coming and investing in those projects. So you can multiply it, and it's really that's the one I like because it's long-term stuff. You start the development of a finance market for startups and innovation for these specific projects, which is really interesting. So I delivered my report on April 14, and then I took like 2 months explaining to the Ministry of Finance how it will work in terms of first the environment, then the people. Those people exist really. There is people in my country that don't have money to do this. So and then how it worked in terms of finance, how it was evaluated, how the rate of the loan the rate of the money that was incoming that would enter from the GCF, and then how it will enter to the banks, how the banks will be returning the money back, and how it will go back, because it's kind of a soft loan. Okay, it's not really money for free. We are OECD. We are not a subject of free money. We need to return it. So, and how was the the rates for each one of the instruments? How was the project finance model? It was really interesting.
In 2 words,
so the bond was it was in September, I remember, when they did all the marketing for it. And then the first finance instrument was ready for the market in January this year. So it was really fast.
In 2 words, would you explain how does the green bond work exactly? What it is in terms of financial instrument? So you buy a paper that is a bond with the obligation to use it on a specific project that has to be something that you just named, alternative energy.
In 2 words, it's a project finance. When you design a project finance is what you design when you have, for instance, a facility like, I don't know, a new mining exploitation, and the owners of this mining goes to a bank, and then they present the project, and they present like 10 pages with all the aspects of the projects in it, which is permits, the institutional framework, the risk, environmental risk, social risk, finance risk, and then you present it. If it's approved, in terms when you have a mining exploitation, you will receive the money to do it. And the project itself is the warranty for the loan. Okay, so this project finance document need to have whatever a finance analyst will need. This is the same. It doesn't. So you need to translate what we were talking before. All the social issues, all the environmental issues are finally translated into money, are monetized. Mm-hmm. I know that normally people have like some issues in terms of translating birds and trees in, and also it's worse when you say you're translating people's lives into money. I know it, but that's the language in today's world. Mm. So if we want to transit from this world where everything can be put in money, in dollars, or in euros, to a world where a person, it's important because it's a person, and a bird, it's important because it's a bird, and it's part, and we are both part of an environment. Mm-hmm. We need to start speaking the language that people understand. Yeah. So what this is a finance project where everything is monetized and everything is translated in finance risk. So part of the risk will be social, part of the risk will be environment, and part of the risk will be the economy and finance. Mm-hmm. And all of that is in one rate. So, and part of the benefit will be the increasing of the human development index of those people. Those people, by this project, can change their lives. And also, you have like 2.5 million tons of CO2 reduced. So it's a huge environmental impact too. But at the end, what the banks or every finance institution will see is the rate and the internal return rate for their investment. The equity IRR. Mm-hmm. So at the end, my model was this money is incoming through this institution. You can see in slide number 1, institutional framework. So can be done at this rate. It will be passed through this institution to the banks at this other rate. And then to people at this rate. This is the risk, the risk, the risk. And that money will come back, and at the end, the equity IRR for the bank is this, for the institution is that, for the GCF is that. Mm-hmm.
You seem like a very knowledgeable person in terms of sustainable finance. I have a question for you. Where would you say it is wise to invest in today? Which sphere, which area of economy?
I was asked the same question last week. I don't know why people is asking for that. But, you know, what I've been sensing in the market. Right now, what we have is a crisis. Okay, crises are good opportunities. In real terms, what we're seeing is that the market is correcting, because in the past, what we had is an overprice for assets. In terms of, if you see United States, part of the effect is the virus, the coronavirus pandemic. But part of the effect is that you already had an overvaluation of the assets. So the market is correcting to the lower price itself. Market always correct. And that phenomenon is not just in the United States. You're having the same phenomena in different parts of the world. And for me, it's the same crisis than 2008, that it's happening. Correction is not just, was not made at the point of the crisis, but it's been made all over the years. That's one point. Second point, European Union is, beside giving lots of money for the people, all the industries and banks and everything, is promoting a fund to help circular economy implementation. Yeah. So what shows you is that the money that will be delivered to the market, it's money to save what is sustainable. Circular economy for politician and bank is kind of recycling. It's not really circular economy. But what one can see is there is a movement then that, and one of my professors in the master, I did my master in finance, and the director of the market was the project that gave the lecture in stock markets. And I remember asking him a question about all this environmental stuff that goes through IFRS, the International Framework Registration System. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I don't know, Lorena, people like you that are experts in environment will give us a number and we will correct the stock market, the stock for the sum. And I said, okay. And he told me, and sometimes a company value is better for the investor when the company is dead instead of alive. Mm-hmm. So you need to be, you have go hard sometimes. And as my professor said, sometimes you need to be compassionate, let someone die. And at this moment, I think that it will be the moment to see what we will be saving, at what cost, and to let some industry die. All what is fossil finally will die anyway. And right now, for instance, Germany has 50% of renewables, and Costa Rica, I think it's 80-something% of renewables. Yeah, so do we really need all the fossil fuel industry, or can we start doing things in order to change it? So I think the new models for investment should go through that finance instrument I design. I think that if you have money and or if you're a good finance person that can understand the social and the environmental risk, start developing portfolios of or maybe like investment portfolios, or for I don't know, innovative projects or innovative industry or sustainable industry, but investment portfolios, and start speaking the language of finance to investors will be a good move in this moment, because those investments are really socially sustainable, environmentally sustainable, but also economically sustainable.
Triple bottom line, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's a good way to go through. Right now, the problem is that normally brokers do not understand the environment, and they treat the same way what is green, deep green, light green, and paint green. So we need to start doing the difference. So if you can calculate and see, well, this environmental risk is 1, this one 2, this one 3, this one 4, to make the difference, to show them green is different. You have different shades of green. You have dark green, and you have light green, and you have stuff that are paint green.
Yeah.
And what I told that person that asked me, I said, well, if you're an investor, start digging in the sustainability report, but not in the part where they say we gave to, I don't know, libraries to, right? No, to see what are they doing with their energy, with their water, and with their lands. Mm-hmm. And start in your mind focusing in those areas that are really the sustainable, the environmental sustainability. Not really if they gave something, I don't know, 1 hectare of water for trees. And also if they have agreements with their communities. How are their relation with the communities, if they have agreements, if they have policies to help them, etc. Because those companies won't have problems with the community, even if they have problems, really, accidents or whatever. And they won't have problems with the national authorities in terms of the environment. So I think that's the good way to start looking for, transit as investor to a more greener world.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, one last question probably. Oh, the sun.
Oh, you have the sun.
Yes, I was hiding behind the curtain, but now it's right in my face. Okay. Anyway, probably the last question for now. It's very interesting to talk to you. You have mentioned many times during this conversation, wonderful discussion, the issue of language. The environmental or sustainability specialists have to take into account and translate their scientific world into the world of finance and economy. What would be the piece of advice you could give to train that skill? Is this a certain book you would suggest to read, or a certain type of education to go through, a course, something that will help sustainability professional to put themselves on the rails of the world out there?
First of all, I think everybody, when you come to this earth, everybody has some skills, and part of the scientist's skills is to question everything and to think alone. So it's very difficult to a scientist to go to the world and speak to normal people, because they normally do not speak to normal people. Okay, so to lose the fear of going to the world is really hard. I normally see that it's easier to have someone that can do that job, to go and speak to the world. It's really difficult for a scientist to do that. But if they can lose that fear, I remember in 2007 or 8, I gave a class for environmental engineers and environmental scientists in an international school. It was kind of one of those courses you take during the summer, and it was in green economy. So I explained them how to translate it, how to do the translation, because for scientists, everything is important, and it's really difficult to choose what to take and translate everything. It's not feasible. So I think maybe if you're in the university or whatever, to take a short course during the summer of about something in management will be good, in order to just learn the language, like that, maybe what is an asset, what's a liability, what is what. Just to speak with other words. Part of what we are is the words we use. Words create reality. So to change the words, to learn that the best 2 parts of a report for a decision maker is the introduction, 1 page, and the conclusion, another page. And then the rest of the report won't be ever read by that person. So that report is important because other people will read it and will explain that to the decision makers. So the conclusion part is really the important part of the report. And it's 1 page. And that page needs to have everything that person can understand. And they understand money. They don't understand anything else. Okay? And if you're already in the market and you're already working, you can go and see there is a lot of information today in the internet. There is a lot of both shows like yours, interviews, and even courses online. So you can go through a general management course. Hopefully, if people have different capabilities, some ones are good in marketing. So you can see green marketing, and you will translate whatever you do in terms of green marketing. Other people are good in finance and can go and maybe take a short course in personal finance. And money is money. The point is, normally, I've seen that in the past, people have feelings, different feelings when it takes to money. when they are talking about money, it's kind of, they feel stuff. I don't feel anything. Money is money. Mm-hmm. So take the emotions aside when you're speaking about money. It's not really the birds. It's not really the person, the people. It's not really a tree. It's not your neighbor. It's not your garden. It's not the park. It's just money. And this part is needed in order to save what can be saved. Because as I say, my professor has, and I really understand that sometimes you need to let die some part of what you wanted. Not everything can be saved. Not everybody can be saved. And for that, I think personal experience helps a lot. When you're a child and you see your grandparent die, you cannot save them. They need to go. They need to, leave you for good. But after that, you learn that people passes. In terms of our side, I always I give a lecture in a management, in a master degree, Introduction to Sustainability. Mm-hmm. And I always said to my student that in my mind, we were going through a big crisis in the world order, the very same crisis we had between the big wars. Before 1914, we had empires, kings, and all of that. And after 1945, we had democracies, United Nations, 195 countries together. So right now we are going through some kind of crisis. And I always told them, I think I won't see it. So if in 30 more years you cross myself and I was wrong, don't tell me. I probably won't remember my name by then. I never thought I would be actually living through this crisis. But I think we are going through a crisis. So we will be moving from something that was like, empires and kings to something else. Maybe a more sustainable world in the best case scenario.
Yeah. Thank you for this wonderful, optimistic words and for this conversation. Thank you for sharing with me and with the listeners your experience. Okay, super.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.